And I was just thinking about it, and I was just wondering, how can we continue the conversation we were having regarding purpose, and just put a personal spin on it, right? And in my thoughts, I'm like, okay, let's say I was sitting across you in a coffee shop and you were looking me dead in the eye and saying, Advocate, I hear you talk about purpose, and I think it's a lovely and a phenomenal thing. But how did God do it for you? What did it look like for you to receive your commission that you speak about? And I would say, I'm so glad you asked. And today, before we can jump right into that, grab your own cup of coffee. I have mine here. Let's start this conversation. Let me pull you in to how it looked like for me. And I'm not saying that it should look exactly the same for you, but I'm saying that maybe in you hearing my story, you'll be able to connect the dots for your story. How about that? Thank you so much. So let's get right into it. For me, the year was 2013, like I've mentioned before, and we were expecting our second child, the girl, and it was an exciting time for me, but I think at this point, I had come to ask a why question. It wasn't pronounced because it was beginning of the year, but I was kind of wondering, is there more to this? Is there more to what I'm experiencing? And why did God make me? So yes, she was then born in February, and in around March, April, a good friend of mine at the time lent me a DVD. And yes, I know it was a DVD with all the CDs in it of Melissa Bevere that was talking about Lioness Arising. And I'm not really sure about what CD I was on in terms of the number. But as she was speaking, I was getting a download. And when I say a download, it was multiple thoughts, right? And at the time, I am breastfeeding my beautiful, I think 2-month-old or 3-month-old baby. And I pull out my purple BlackBerry. I start writing away. And what I'm writing in essence is just this organization that I'm seeing. And girl child focused organization, and this is what it will do, this is what it looks like, and I'm in a zone, if I can call it that, right? But I couldn't, obviously these words and this terminology, I guess it's in retrospect, right? It's not something that I had known at the time. So I start writing away, and I had multiple names, I remember, of what we would call this organization, but I knew that it would be there to help a girl child do certain things, right? And I put that away, but I think that was a marker for me, because the conversation I subsequently then had with my husband around what it would look like for me to pursue purpose, and the organization that then came, Legal Advocacy for Women, was in answering this why question, right? So fast forward, the organization has started what I think should be it. And around same year, this is 2013, I then attend a conference, a Dream Week conference that week. And it was amazing, it was insane. And I think the stirring intensified at this time, because I was like, or there was a feeling that I am sitting here and these girls are dying. right? I've got to do something about it. And in one of the sessions or between the breaks, I get the name Her Voice. And I hope I can find the clip I took that I wrote on my journal at that time, because the initial communication from heaven that came was Her Voice International. But in my head, I quickly said, no, it can't be Her Voice International. I haven't heard anybody talk about international, but I've heard people talk about foundation. And I changed it to Her Voice Foundation. And then all these things similar to what I had around March, April, were coming again now when I'm sitting in this conference, just revising how it looks like. But then, fast forward, I get out of formal work, but you need to understand what was top of my head was what would make money. So I started a consulting firm for legal consultancy. And I then asked, okay, what makes sense? Legal advocacy for women made sense for me, right? I had already drafted it and stuff. This, Her Voice, I have always known about it because of these particular markers where God now finally downloaded it. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, no, I'll get to it. I'll get to it someday, right? And which obviously we know with God, it doesn't work like that. And yeah, we then hit 2014. We hit the ground running, set up the organization, recruit fourth year LLB students, meet up with Law Society. The girl is busy, I'm seeing what I'm seeing in front of me. In February, the Lord leads me to a blog. And this blog, I bless the Lord for the lady that wrote that blog, started a journey for me that changed everything. And well, there are a few things, there are a lot of things she was dealing with, but chief amongst them was submission. And for me, for the longest time, I had believed that submission is a personality thing. And I had always thought that it has something to do with how you are wired. And it is at this point that the Father says to me, but that's not the case. It's my word. You need to submit yourself to my word. Because if you don't, then you are being prideful, right? And that began a journey that rewrote my heart. Now, for the first time, all the lies I had believed about submission, about womanhood, and all these things were being bust by God. The focus is no longer legal advocacy for women. Now, I had to pause that. I had clients already. We had clients already. And we had to call them because with what the Lord was doing in my heart at that time, we could not afford to be distracted in any way, shape, or form, right? And yeah, so now during this time, and it was over a period of about 4 months or so, that the Lord was rewiring. I call it a open heart surgery because I was alive, but I knew that my heart was changing. I knew that my heart was being transformed, and its transformation caused obviously a hoo-ha for people around me, and up until I think out of frustration, I then asked God, I think around March, April, are there women-specific scriptures? Because up and now, the Lord was then downloading how he had made women, how why submission was necessary, and I'm learning all these things, and I am then questioning, does this mean that I've been wrong all along in terms of just believing that we are all human beings? And lo and behold, I was. And when I asked that question, he then accelerated the download of the message that would be her voice, right? Because when I started digging all these things that he says about her voice, about female, about womanhood, then at the end of all of that learning, the phrase, and I'm going to say the phrase because it's different for other people. I guess for other people like Moses have a burning bush and whatever. But for me, it was a phrase that just said, restore God's order for female design. This blue journal has that word that I got, restore God's order for female design. I'm like, but God, how am I going to do this? And he then says to me, teach my girls. I'm like, I'm still learning. I cannot be teaching anyone right now. But he says, teach my girls. So I knew at that point that, well, obviously the commission wasn't going to change. I needed to change the way I viewed myself. And yeah, lo and behold, not lo and behold, that's then how the journey started, So my download, and I'm going to pause this here and say, with those words, and this is something then I'll answer in the future video, but with those words, I knew for sure that this is what I was called to do. I no longer doubted or questioned. I might not have known right at this point how that was going to look like, but I knew that the Lord was asking me to partner with him. And I researched, I learned, I did all sorts of things. So we're still in the coffee shop. You're still looking across me in that coffee shop with your coffee in hand. And this is what I would say to you as my final parting shots. It might not make sense, and it won't. But you've got to be able to capture all the moments that you sense, because sometimes you don't know for sure. But you sense that it is God telling you to do something bigger than yourself. You've got to lean in. Don't shy away. Don't doubt. Because I believe that most of the reason why people are not living in their element is because, yes, they've heard the Lord tell them. Yes, they've heard things, spoken to them. But they went on and questioned it and doubted it and then parked it. One, or you've aborted it. You just thought, no, this is not what I'm going to do, either because it's not up your alley, or either because it doesn't look like anything you wanted to do. Whichever way it is, whichever one it is, I would just advise you and plead with you that you don't abort what you sense. Because initially, it might not be a knowing, but it might be a sense. Lean into that. Ask God to clarify. Ask God to give you more to go on. And He's faithful. He's faithful to do just that. I'm reminded of Mary and an angel who walks up to her and say, hey, you highly favored one. And then she's like, what is the meaning of this? And the angel says, the Lord is with you, and you shall do this and this and this and this. I'm amazed at how she never flinched. She just had one question. how is this going to be possible? Because your servant doesn't know any man. That is all she asked. She never questioned, is it my head? Am I crazy or whatever? Because I think by this time, probably in the culture she grew up in, they knew that God spoke to them. They knew that angels appeared to people. So I think I am here to say, know that God speaks. Know that God commissions. Know that there is a particular and a specific designed purpose for you. And the Lord wants to assist you to align with that. That is why I believe my ministry is not necessarily for somebody out in the street who's coming into salvation, but for me, it's for his daughters who have been walking with him, but they don't really know their why. And God is saying, Miliswa, let's sit in front of this camera. Let's share your why and how I gave you. And maybe, just maybe, somebody will get a hold of it and come to me and ask me about it. That's my desire. And I'm hoping that in the next video, you'll join me as I tackle some other issues. But thank you so much for being part of this video. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the